early. But coming, if you haven't been here before, welcome. Definitely happy to see so many people engaged in it, and what's going on with fire service. There are restrooms in the back if you need them. We do have some water and refreshments. Unfortunately, we turned the air conditioner off because it's kind of loud, but if you get hot, let us know. We'll try and get it back on. So this workshop is with the boards for the 3 fire districts. This is a post-levy discussion. We're looking at what we're going to do next with the levies that we had on the ballot that we heard from the voters about. So we're looking at operations and actions post-levy discussion. I would like to start with the pledge, which we do every time. So join me in that. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I'm going to hand over to the chief. He's got a presentation he's going to go through. At the end, he has kind of where we're at currently with actions and recommendations. And at that point, we'll go ahead and open it up for comment. And we'd love to hear from everyone of you. So if you'll stick around, and we'll get to it. Thank you. Chief.
Thank you. So thank you all for being here. I appreciate the interest, not only online, but in the room, and even those that are on social media talking about tonight. It's great to finally be a buzz and be a topic of discussion. As you know, we went through a levy vote, and I would just say it's a question that we posed to the community on what they wanted from their fire service and if they wanted to enhance that. During that period of time, there was a lot of discussion about why it was, and I think we didn't connect with as many in the community as we would like to. And a lot of that had to do with our ground game, a lot of that had to do with our timeline, and a lot of that had to do with it's just a very independent community. Sometimes folks just drive past the fire station and go, oh, there's firemen there, and just keep on going, and they don't really realize what goes on in the community. So when I built this, I built it according to the way that I wanted to have a conversation with my bosses, understanding that you would be here as well. If at any point in time I jump into fire service jargon or I say something that you don't understand, please feel free to raise your hand. I'd like to save all the debate and the big topics of discussion till the end, but certainly if I can clarify something, please let me know. So the first thing I really wanted to do is sit down and wrap my head around why we were here. I think we're here because the levy didn't pass. The needs that we identified for the fire districts as what we perceived as needs were presented, and they were not affirmed by the community. So therefore, we need to kind of step back and take a look at our current organization, what we're doing. One of the things I like to say is always ask why. Anything we do in life, we should always be asking why we're doing what we're doing, continue to validate. You know, I've got some numbers here on the second bullet point that talk a little bit about growth in the county, and depending on who you talk to and what source you look at, you see that Bonner County has grown anywhere from 20 to 27% in the last 5 years. Now, I understand that different years there were larger or smaller numbers for those years. Understanding that our call volume has gone up about 15%. So I like to put that in there and make people understand that if the county did grow 27%, I'm not telling you that we have 27% more fires. That's not accurate. But our call volume is going up, and it's got to be related to not only county growth, but number of people that are visiting, traveling through here. So the numbers that are up here, 15 to 20% growth, and I'm going to stay on the conservative side. I'm not going to put 27% up there. But I did have a conversation with somebody at the County Planning Commission recently, and they told me that, you know, 20 to 27% growth isn't that much growth. I feel like it is. But then again, maybe my perspective is skewed. It is when you look at what it's doing to our community and the impact it's having on emergency services. And I say emergency services being law enforcement, so fire. There are things in the fire service, and I think everybody's felt inflation. And there was a fire chief in the south part of the state that did an in-depth study on inflation and how it impacts emergency services. And he made a comment that it's hitting us harder than it's hitting the community. I didn't really like that comment because it's not for me to tell you how hard inflation is hitting you at home. But I will tell you that there are things that we have to replace, that we have to purchase, that we have to keep this fire department and these fire agencies running, that has hit almost a 50% inflation. And you might find that hard to believe, but I'll give you an example of a hose. A hose that used to cost me $100, $175 now. And there's no way around that. When a hose breaks, I have to buy a hose. Or I have to carry less hose on fire engines, which reduces. That's a very simple analogy, but it's an analogy that I use. That's a real life piece of equipment that I looked at as far as. So really that leads us to having a conversation about we have needs in the future that our current budget and our current budget track will not keep up with. If I can put up a graph to show our needs and our budget, where it's at. When you start looking at 20% growth, 50% inflation, aging equipment that hasn't been addressed, and then the fact that our budget is capped at 3% each year, there's obviously a delta in there, right? There's a difference. There's an issue that we need to address. So we either need to scale back, find a way to do business cheaper, or be creative. One of the things that I truly believe in, and I had this conversation with the commissioners when I became fire chief, I even had the conversation with the previous fire chief when I was a deputy chief, is a strategic plan. When I drive from here to Spokane Airport to pick up friends that are coming to visit, because once you move to Idaho, you get a lot of people that want to visit you. But when I drive down to the airport to pick them up, I always put the airport in my GPS. Why? Because I don't know how to drive there? No, because I'm interested in what's going. I want situational awareness on my travel. So that's how I would relate a strategic plan. We really need a strategic plan to assess where we're going, what we're doing. And again, we need to be asking the questions on what can we afford? Is there something in our current business model that we do that we can no longer afford to do? Are there programs that we're currently participating in that maybe we can no longer afford to do? And what are the financial impacts of not providing that level of service to create enough savings to allow us to focus those dollars elsewhere? Or by pulling back.
You want to
from
mirror
those
your phone to that?
I tried to, yeah. It said it wouldn't do it.
Interesting.
Well, it's done, Bernie. Welcome to the meeting. And with that, I lost my train of thought. So anyway, we need to find out if something like the wildland program, when we say, look, we can't afford to do the wildland program anymore. We're not going to do the wildland program anymore. And we pull back from that. We have to be prepared for the loss in revenue that creates for us. And so while we're trying to cut in other areas, pulling back from the wildland program might cause us to have another $100,000, $150,000 shortfall that we need to then further cut. So in a way, I'm playing a little bit of a game with Dom. One of the things we need to talk about is our fleet, right? We're trying to get ahead of this issue that we have with our fleet. 25-year-old fire engines are not sustainable. Our guys were responding to a call the other day, and the fire engine started having mechanical problems on the way to the call. That's a reality. And this isn't the first time that we've had a fire engine break down on the way to a fire. And it's going to continue to happen until we get to a point where this fleet is either sustainable and we invest enough money into making these old fire engines completely new, or we get to a point where we're at that tipping point of getting into fire engines that are a little bit more sustainable. But we need to also ask ourselves, is our fleet the right size? We have fire engines in every single fire station, but some of them aren't staffed and some of them don't have volunteers near. Do we need to pull back? And what does that look like? If we pull a fire engine out of a fire station, what are the impacts of the insurance rating? And I don't want to do that, but the reality is we don't have any other option. In Northside, we've made a decision recently to sell some fire engines to create some revenue. And that's the reality is we bought that fire engine from another fire department that was doing the same thing. And as soon as we handed them a check for $25,000 for that older fire engine, they said, oh, we get to pay the power. I mean, this is the situation that fire departments are in. So what I don't want to get to is to be in a situation where I have to come to my boss and say, I don't have the money, the boss is. I don't have the money in the checking account to make payroll, or I have to sell a fire engine so that I can pay our Avista bill. Okay? So what I'm doing is actually having these conversations early from the problem, but actually late to the show a little bit. We should have been having this conversation. Well, and then we need to start talking about outside the box. You know, I mentioned approaching the insurance industry. The insurance industry is headed towards a crisis. whether they want to admit it or not, there's an insurance crisis coming. And it's not related to our capabilities, it's not related to the levy, it's related to their losses. They can't just stop writing policies because they're not gonna have any revenue. But they also can't incur any more risk. So at what point are we in a position to leverage them to go to them and say, you need to help us be sustainable? And what does this look like? Other thing we could talk about is facility rentals. If we have all these fire stations sitting, are we leaving money on the table by not renting out the fire stations, right? That's just a harebrained idea I have today sitting down, but I'm thinking of all these ways that we could, storage is at a premium up here, right? I'll use the bay station. Bay Station 6, it's a 2-bay station. Could we rent that up? Would we be bringing in $500 a month for renting that? And if we do that, we can't call it a fire station. And what's the impact of that community? And I understand that. I'm not proposing that. I'm just saying these are sometimes the silliest solutions seem really silly at the beginning until you actually start talking. So I wanted to kind of revisit why we're in a JP. I think most of the commissioners understand this. We talk about it. We do, whether or not we say it formally, we're constantly evaluating these. Probably on a monthly basis, if not bi-monthly basis. So obviously there's a cost savings, it creates a leaner overhead. You have one fire chief rather than 4 fire chiefs. Streamlined operations, staff is working together, training is more cohesive. We're able to share resources. The reality is that each one of these districts doesn't have to have a reserve fire engine. We could have one reserve fire engine system, which may not seem like a big deal because we didn't need to go out and buy it, but it does cost money to keep fire engines on the road. And if you've been in the Sagle board meetings paying the bills for 1231, you know what it costs to keep a fire engine on the road. Allows us to share our volunteers, ultimately brings more firefighters to the scene, which then results in a positive outcome of whatever that incident is, whether I'm cutting someone out of the car, putting out a structure fire. 2 firefighters at either one of those incidents aren't going to do much unless we're able to get more help there in a manner that is deployable. We had those discussions about the 1-person fire engines really showing up and not being effective. So now we have no more 1-person fire engines will have an effective response force showing up in a much more deployable manner. And then with the JPA, you still have that local service, you have that local control, you have your fire district board that you can talk to, and each fire district is for that level of service. Even though they're leveraging the JPA, they're providing that level of service at the local level. Just to reiterate, for those that maybe don't know, or this is the first time you've come to a meeting and you don't know a lot about our organizations, is the turquoise at the top is Northside Fire. Westside Fire is the one that goes out west along the river, and then Sagle Fire is the yellowish color to the south, and the X's indicate where we have staffed fire stations. We have more fire stations than that. Between 3 fire districts, we have 12 fire stations. But that is where you're getting your paid staff. Of course, out of the Bottle Bay Station, we have a resident firefighter, which is a unique model for us and something that has become hugely beneficial. So just to break down kind of the budget priorities as we jump into what I would call budget season, right? Because August is we have our workshops and our public hearings. This is really what we're looking at for the individual districts. And much like the levy ask was individualized for the needs at the district level, the next year's budget is going to be allocated in that manner as well. So for Sagle, we've got capital needs that we need to start addressing, and then we have facility. We have some big ticket items coming up on this station alone, including a roof that we need. I use need loosely, but need if you don't want us to have buckets all over the fire station catching rainwater, and you don't want to have mold issues in a couple of years. We've got to replace this roof. It leaks and it's an issue. We also have things like maybe an air conditioner for this room. It might be nice to put in. Hopefully people keep coming to our meetings and they're popular, but there are things like that that we need to address. Westside, we need to keep talking about staffing and keep making sure that we can maintain that level of staffing. And I'll talk about what my future vision for staffing is. And then of course, 1731, we bought out of California, is a great engine. But when we bought it, I said 5 to 7 years, we need to have a plan. It'd be easy for me to kick these cans down the road and tell you everything's hunky-dory. But if we're not thinking about what happens in 5 years, we don't start saving, we don't start applying for grants, we don't start thinking about what our options are beyond the lifespan of that engine. And it could be even sending that engine in for a refurb. We don't know yet. We haven't evaluated that. But And then Northside staffing, at the top of my list for Northside is figuring out how we can retain those grant positions. We have a staffing of 2 permanent and 1 grant position per day at the Northside station, which is in Ponderay. And 3 firefighters is probably still not enough for Walmart or Home Depot or North 40 or any of those commercial buildings. So we need to figure out how to maintain that level of staffing and even continue to support our volunteer program and enhance our volunteer program, because if something is to happen up there, it's going to be very labor intensive. And then Northside's done a really good job of finding some used apparatus, anything from, $25,000 to $35,000. But we have to have a better plan. Those are great stopgaps. We have to have a better long-term plan for how we keep 25-year-old fire engines on. Current district overview, and you'll see the 1-1-3 is supposed to be 1/3, but I couldn't make it look better. A fraction there, but you have each district has 1/3 of a fire chief, 1/3 of an admin. That's the number of firefighters total in each district. And then I have the per day, because when I talk about 6 firefighters, they're broken up into shifts. So I want to be very clear with people. I don't want people to think there's 9 firefighters on duty in Sagle. It's 9 firefighters with 3 per day. And there's an overview. So this number down here is very important because it has 12 firefighters available with Sandpoint Fire. So as we look at our mutual automatic aid system, if there's no other calls going on in a perfect world, I can get 12 firefighters to a structure fire. And that is if everybody is at their optimal staff. Sometimes Sandpoint doesn't have 3 firefighters on per day. So that number can fluctuate. And then you have a chief officer coming in for command. That's either Chief Gilcrease or myself. That isn't quite NFPA standards, but that's getting closer than we've ever been. First is, if the districts were to say, we don't get along anymore, we're just going to go off on our own, this is what that would look like, right? Each district would have to figure out leadership, whether it's a volunteer position or a paid position. They would have to figure out how to deal with fire sign-off, fire inspections, all the administrative functions of that district. Really, Northside and Westside would have to lay off firefighters to be able to afford a paid chief, unless they were able to find a volunteer. And that's really what it is. So with that model, you would see that reduction from 12 down to 9 firefighters now showing the fire in jurisdiction. So some of the things we need to start talking about, I'm going to keep revisiting that strategic plan. I'm not a strategic plan guy. I put a few of them together, but I truly believe in it. And a strategic plan can be a very simple document that you do in-house. But we need to have a roadmap for the future. And so I like to see the community engagement. I'm glad people are here. I wish this many people were here during the levy discussion, whether they were pro or against levy. We needed an engagement, and we just couldn't get people engaged. But now that we're past that, I'm glad people are here because I want them to know what our capabilities are. I want them to know what our strengths are and our weaknesses. Yes, even our weaknesses. I was talking with one of our captains today about that, and he goes, it's really not tough. It's not easy to talk to the community about what your weaknesses are. We want to be strong. We want to present this. We can handle it all, right? You're going to call 911. We're going to do our best, but I also want you to know what we're not showing up with. We need to start talking about, what are changes in our business model? Are we sustainable? That last bullet point, you probably think, why in the world is the sheriff on here? Well, if you don't know, if there is not a fire district, the sheriff is responsible for fire suppression. And if we have areas that are outside of our district, they are responsible for fire suppression. If we, for whatever reason, become insolvable and are not here any longer, the sheriff is going to be responsible for fire suppression. Yes, even in Home Depot, people are going to be looking at the sheriff's deputies. We'll put the fire out. There are places in Florida. Florida has similar state laws. There are places in Florida where the fire departments actually fall under the sheriff, and that's their organizational structure because the sheriff has legal authority for fire suppression. That's not the way it is here. It's if in the absence of a fire district. If we are going to start pulling back, shrinking, ceasing to exist, the sheriff needs to be engaged as a stakeholder because that would be a big issue for them to deal with. Some things we need to start talking about is, are we going to continue to support Bonner County EMS with mutual aid? What does mutual aid between the fire districts look like? There's been comments on social media. I don't need my engine going down there. And back in the day, it was Sandpoint didn't go across the bridge to go south to help. That was the way it was. Is there a cost to that? Is there an operational benefit to that? Do we have enough resources in Sagle where we can take care of our own and we don't need to help Sandpoint? I will tell you that mutual aid is a two-way street. One of the issues that was surfacing with Westside, if we were unable to deal with the staffing levels in Westside, is at some point Sandpoint was gonna go, we can't go to Westside and give you mutual aid. And you're sending us one person on fire engine. It has to be equal resources. And it has to be shared. Has to be proportionate was the word I was looking for. That word came to me just in time. You know, and there's other things in here. Does the sheriff take over? You know, what does that look like? Does EMS take over? Do we merge with EMS, right? Subscription service has been talked about. Tom and I talked about subscription service at the last Northside meeting. How do you go from our model to a subscription service though? Nobody has that pathway for me, right? And we have contracts that we sign with people, but I'll be honest, they come in and they sign the contract because their insurance wants them to have it, and we never hear from them again. Contract expires and they go on their merry way, and that's the same thing. If you look at Tennessee, subscription fire departments are rolling up. Cops, the local law enforcement is going into the fire stations, confiscating the fire engines, shutting the fire stations down. Fire chiefs who own the fire engine, because it's a different model there, are going and taking them and driving them home. Their subscription service is failing. So I'm not saying it would fail here, and I'm not saying I'm opposed to having conversations, but how do you go from where we're at to that? And is it sustainable? Do we create a smaller district? One smaller district pulled back to the urban and suburban areas. And this is the big question, and I've been learning a lot about this. And I'm pointing at Dave because Dave is probably my source for planning questions. I'm learning a lot about planning and county planning and the land use. And my question is, how do we fit into that? The county is going to look at their land use map and they're going to say, well, this is forest and ag, this is urban, this is R10 and R5. Did I get that right? No.
At this time, yeah.
Okay, but still, like, what service level do those people expect, right? And then how does response times fit in? Because at some point you respond an hour to a fire. You have to ask yourself, how effective are we gonna be to show up, right? So I think those are big questions, and it's weird here because we don't have a strong relationship with the county, and I'm doing everything I can to build that relationship. Still maintain friends and advocate for the fire service, but we need to do that. So we need to still continue to do that and get them into the conversation. So there has been a lot of discussion about Bill 208. And there's been a lot of discussion, more discussion outside of the fire service, not 208. And so I dove into it a couple months ago and did some preliminary numbers. And those numbers were a little bit skewed. And the last week and a half, I spent some time doing a deep dive into what 208 would look like with the three districts, because I knew there were going to be questions and I knew there were going to be people that are saying that this is the solution. And the first time it really came up was at the Northside meeting. Commissioner Bowman put it on the agenda because he wanted to just throw it out there and start having the conversation, rip the Band-Aid off. Let's have the conversation because we have to look at every option. So based on my preliminary numbers, if we were to go in that route, first of all, it's not a quick thing. It's not anything that anybody in the state has been through. And there are two other entities looking at it right now, and they are going to hit the pause button and take a year to explore it. So it's not a fast solution. It's not a quick solution. And more importantly, for us, I want to paint a very realistic picture of what it would look like. So our combined budget would be roughly $3.1 million. The mill levy rate would go to 49, which would be an increase for Northside. It would be a significant decrease for Sagle and Westside. As an interesting point, Northside's valuation is a little bit, basically the same number of Sagles and Westsides put together. So if you start looking at the skewed fire protection in this county, it is really skewed. Sagle has the biggest budget, one of the largest area. Northside is the second largest area, but has the most commercial. So when I look at this, to me, as a fire chief that is trying to make sure I have the resources to protect the community, my first gut instinct tells me the commercial is not paying its fair share. And I don't know how that works, but the commercial is not paying its fair share. When you have to protect a Home Depot, North 40, a Walmart, Pacific Steel, and all the stuff that goes on in there, and all that other stuff on Triangle. And you've got another fire district that is a veteran community for all intents and purposes that I think has 3 or 4 commercial occupancies. So there's a significant imbalance, and this will play into, discussions as we go forward, but when you have that skewed, it's really hard to take apples and pineapples and put them in the same basket and hand them around and say, hey, you want an apple, right? The biggest concern for me is Sagle's capabilities with decrease, right? We can see through the mill levy rate that the amount of that money coming into the fire service in Sagle would be. Yes, that's a combined budget, but you have some significant needs in Sagle that need to be addressed with Sagle's budget. The analogy I used with a staff member was if two people get married and one person has $150,000 in debt, you get married, you both have $150,000 in debt. Sagle's not in debt, but Sagle has some things we need to address. So if we were to put everybody in the same pot, the other districts would have to figure out how to address that, or we would have to figure out how to make that fair. So that's something that I can't wrap my head around. The other thing, and this is a really big one, and perhaps Commissioner Townsend knows a little bit more how this works. This is where I got lost in the math. I usually do pretty good with math because I have a calculator now. I do really good with some math. What I can't figure out is what it would look like, because the other two districts levy on, which is a tax, I get it, but they levy on land and improvements. Sagle does on improvements only. So now you have somebody that has a $500,000 house on 80 acres that's only paying on that $500,000 house. All of a sudden, that is shifting. Our budget stays the same. So if Sagle were to do this next month, the budget stays the same, but the impact to the community doesn't. And so if you were to take these districts and combine them, the first question we have to ask is, what's the fix for that? The second question is, what's the impact to people with a lot of property or with an imbalance of property rich and a smaller home, right? And do you have anything to add on that?
Well, the only other complex aspect to deal with is lakefront. So the property values lakefront in District 5, which is the one I represent, are very high. Currently, the mill rate only applies to the structure, which is what we're protecting. We're not protecting that lakefront property necessarily. So if we had to go to a homogeneous model, it would shift the burden potentially disproportionately to lakefront owners, when I don't think it would actually represent the service that they would receive. So we have to come to grips to that, and it's not clear to me what that would look like. So that's a challenge.
This is chief, I don't Department of Land, levies tax rate on undeveloped property to protect, young structures.
And I don't know what that levy rate is. Yeah. And that comes up, and I don't want to get too far off this, but people have asked the question all the time, why do you go to 1? Well, someone calls 911, I don't have the ability to sit here at the fire station and determine whether they're calling 911 for a true emergency or not. I have to assume they're calling 911 because they're having the worst day of their life. They'll hope they have a fire in their backyard. We're showing up, and to put that fire out first and foremost, to protect their life and property. The second thing would be, hey, that fire's too big. We don't have the resources. Now we're going to revert to more of a structure defense mode, and we're going to work in conjunction with IDL. So I get that all the time, and I have to just be blunt. I can't tell people, well, I'm going to send IDL, but if your house catches on fire, go ahead and call me. Like that's not a service model. So we need to put the fire out. What we're doing a lot better with this year is engaging IDL and getting out of there. When property and lives are protected, we're disengaging, we're turning the incident over to IDL because it is our primary responsibility. We have to get back to protecting our community. Now, IDL does have the option of saying, we need a water tender tomorrow or the next day, which they did for Northside, and we will find someone and we will put them on that water tender, and then they pay us to be. And that comes out of their budget, their money, and reimbursement to us. So that's a little bit, I don't know if anybody in this room is wrapping their heads around why we go to EMS calls, and if these come up as comments, but EMS calls and wildland calls are what I get hit with the most. And so I try to explain it the best I can. So all the way down to the last bullet point, I'm gonna try to speed this up for the sake of time. I think bearing with me, almost 30 minutes now. At the end of the day, with that budget, following the 80-20 rule, we'd have $2.5 million for personnel costs. If we were to follow that 80-20, which is that rule of thumb that we try to use for personnel and operations. That's not a windfall. It doesn't give us 3 people at every fire station. It doesn't save the safer grant positions in Northside. It doesn't give us staffing at every single fire station. If it was some sort of windfall and a huge difference, then I would be having a different conversation, but it doesn't put us in any situation that we don't have currently. I did go through some pros and cons. I'll put these up on the board for you to take a look at. Obviously, it makes my life easier, but I'm not here to make my life easier. I'm here to serve the community. There's a ton of things that Tammy and I do on a daily basis. It would be a lot easier if we could do this, but at the end of the day, customer service and what's best for the community is always going to win. You know, the decrease in the mill levy rate, as much as I'd like to be the chief that said, hey, I lowered the mill levy rate in Sagle. We can't afford that. And I don't see how we would be able to address the things that are coming up in the next few years for Sagle specifically, with shifting that into a larger pot. So here are my recommendations. And of course, I work for you and I'm happy to take direction, but my recommendation starts with the JPA model continues to show its benefit, saving all 3 fire districts money. We have local control. You have local fire commissioners that you can go to. And ultimately these parties, should they strike gold or win the lottery, could pull out and establish their own fire department. Northside, if they had gotten their own levy, or if they gotten their levy, had money in there for their own fire chief or a chief officer. So they could have made that decision. I absolutely believe we should continue with community engagement. As tired as I am coming out of the levy drive, I still do want us to continue to have town halls, open halls, have people come in and understand a little bit more about the fire service, because what we're seeing is coming away from the city of Sandpoint. There wasn't as much community engagement as there needed to be. And so we're going to turn that around and we're going to continue to be approachable to the community. Thanks to the action of the board tonight, we're going to embark on a needs assessment, which will lead us into a strategic plan, which is going to give us a really good idea of where we're at. Tim is actually also, on my request, going to do a bit of an audit of our organization. What are we doing wrong? What are we not thinking about? What are we not leveraging? And then I think we need to start having conversations. You know, I even put in here, should the fire districts exist in current form? That should be put out, because people have answered our questions either on social media or in the survey. When we did that survey last year, there were a few people that said, you need to pull back to the urban areas. You need to pull back to the highway corridors, you know, and I don't know what that looks like, the de-annexed property, and I don't know what service we'd be able to provide, because we're already behind the curve with growth and costs. The other recommendation that I'm going to have on here is we need to engage the insurance industry, and I'm working through a couple contacts I have in the community to try to get higher ups in the insurance industry to have them understand that I foresee what's going on. I think they need to come to the table for some discussions. I think we need to really evaluate our volunteer program. There's been a lot of discussion about it. There's been a lot of accusations that we don't have a volunteer program, but in reality, we need to have a conversation about it. Is it we leveraging the dollars right? Is there value added? If I bring someone into the organization and I spend $10,000 training and outfitting them, and they come to training and we give them certs and we send them to EMT school at $600 and we send them to fire academy at $1,000, and they leave us in 6 months and go to Spokane Valley. Did I just train Spokane Valley's next firefighter? And bigger question, is that a gift of public funds? They never came back and they never just gave us any service, right? So I think we need to ask those hard questions. As your fire chief, I'm going to continue to beat the drum on 3-person engine companies. When I have an engine show up in an incident, I need to run a number of people showing up. The relationship between career staff and volunteer staff, I'm going to continue to use the analogy, a baseball analogy. Everybody, if you're a baseball fan, you know what a bench is, right? We got people on the bench that are ready to go, but if there's a fly ball to left center, are you sending somebody from the bench to catch that, or are you putting somebody that's already out on the field? If I get a volunteer that lives 20 minutes from the fire station and they come in for an incident, what point in that incident curve are they showing up at that incident, right? And what are they able to accomplish? If I have a volunteer that lives off Bottle Bay Road and there's a wreck on Highway 95 and they can't even get to the fire station, what do I do with that level, that service level? So, finding that balance and finding out how those folks come in and support us is gonna be really important. I think we need to continue relationships. I've jumped out of order on these. I apologize. Things are just catching my eye. Line with the county vision. I kind of talked about that. I think we need to continue to have those conversations. I'm the first chief in a while that has really sounded the alarm on growth. And it's not because I want to say no, or I want to make people's lives difficult, or a comment I saw today on Facebook is that I'm making people move their plot line plans. I don't have the authority to do that. But anyway, I do look at the fire code and I try to hold people to that because it is a state law. But more importantly, every time I turn around, we're dropping. At some point, the chickens are gonna come off the roost on Sylvia. Yeah, probably long after my tenure here, but that's the way my brain works. And then, of course, after we accomplish all of these bullet points, we may or may not get to a 3-person in the company, but after we look at all these bullet points, I think we sit down and we revisit after the completion of the community-driven strategic plan. And then we see where we sit. And we go from there. So just to recap, I think the JPA works. Any district that feels different.
Yeah.
Mute, Bernie. Need to mute. Any district that feels that they can lead can. Get the community engaged in that strategic plan, because there's a huge portion of both the needs assessment and the strategic planning that's going to rely on community. If we're unable to get people in here and actually engage them, then it's only going to be as good as firefighters sitting around the table saying, this is what we need to do. So with that, that's my presentation. Thank you for giving me 37 minutes.
Thanks for the job of time. So we do want to go to public comment, and I do want to have enough time for everybody that wants to speak, and I hope everybody does speak. Do that, but first, I don't have anything to add to what Chief said. Anybody that's on the boards or the fire committee, the other fire commissioners have anything they want to add before we sort of get feedback from the public, their personal time to be here?
I'll jump in.
Sure, go ahead.
I really appreciate everything the chief laid out. He did a great job laying it out. I'd just like to add that, a lot of the adjustments that we've been talking about around the table have been administrative adjustments. And whatever model that we as the body, decide on, it has to have some ramifications and improvements on operations. It has to get down to the firefighters and their capability and to do the things that we ask them to do. So throw that into the consideration when we talk about how we divide things and build this, whatever. It's got to have an operational application. That's the only thing I want to add.
Anybody else?
I just like to add, I think we're going backwards, the community needs to make the decision, it's the community's decisions, not the fire service. What level of service do they want? In the last 20 years, in spite of all the growth in population, structures, valuations, we don't have any more resources. As a matter of fact, we have less than we had 20 years ago in terms of professional firefighters and equipment. And so, it's getting more and more difficult to provide the services that we would like to provide for the community with the resources we have. The way our budget figures out, we're allowed to raise our budget 3% every year. And the county assessor every year determines what our mill rate is, what our assessment is. He takes, the value, the assessed valuation of our district and divides it into our budget and determines what our mill rate is, and so, because of inflation that Chief brought up, the assessed valuation of the district is going up much quicker than our budget, which is 3%. So our mill rate is going down. The patrons of our district are getting a tremendous value in my mind because their tax rates are going down, while our, which our 3% increase per year is just not enough, to meet inflation. The wages, we pay a fair wage to our firefighters. our equipment, our utilities, our training, is going up, much faster than our budget. And so we're at a tipping point, we need to know, what does the community want? Do they want us to continue to provide, the current level of service, enhanced level of service, or lower services? I mean, after the levy this spring, we didn't have any choice. We had to reduce services. We had to brown out the Kerrywood station because we couldn't afford to maintain it. And I think that's gonna continue. The chief is doing a terrific job of trying to provide, the resources we have within our budget, but it's just getting more and more difficult. And I see, in the long term, our level of service decreasing unless we get, more resources to devote to protect our patrons.
Thanks, Gary. Well said. Gary's in Sagle and he has the south end of the district,
Yeah,
so
I'm
he's very
commissioner,
sensitive to Gary.
I service the Coquilala, Kerrywood area,
So let's transition to public comment. I do have a request. If you care to share your name, please do. Tell us what district you're in. If you're in one of our districts, if you're not and you still have a comment, you can still make a comment. We just want to hear what district you're from and so we can pay extra attention to those that are in our own district. So anybody care to kick it off? Yeah, go ahead.
We talk about who be Walmart, North 40, all those corporations get rid of them.
No, but the first one that I'm going to approach is Lignetics. I think they should buy us a ladder truck. To answer your question, Kevin, what I want to understand a little bit more is how those properties are levied, right, before I go in. Somebody like Walmart, I realize I can't walk into the store and talk to the store manager and she says, yeah, I'll go ahead and give you an extra couple $100 a year, right? But at some point I want to understand what that is, and then I want to find out what are the other conversations that's happening that I think is very important, and I don't know where to go, because sometimes I go to the county commissioners and they do this. But, and I love them, but just, I need answers. Sales tax. We have so many visitors here. And my services to the visitors, and we don't keep track of it. We joke about showing up and looking at a license plate, but let's be honest, we show up and it's the public and we serve them. But we have so many visitors, so many tourists, so many motorists coming through here that at some point there needs to be a way to recoup some of that, because it'll all put on you as the homeowner, right? And now you're a homeowner that, because the Kerrywood Fire Station closed, your property tax didn't go down, right? You're not saving any money. But what does it look like to bring in a consumption tax, and how could we have those discussions at a county level without me being run out of town on a rail, tar and feather, right? I don't want to do that, but I also want to find a way to say the people that are coming into North 40, that I was behind one of them the other day and they spent $800 and they weren't from here. And how can we get them to help us out by addressing driving up and down our highway?
Send them a bill.
Well, we do, but that's not a guaranteed. And it's also not enough to necessarily pay for us to be sitting here all day to have run that one traffic accident, because sometimes it's $300. And so every little bit helps, and we do have a cost recovery program. There are a lot of things that need to line up to make sure that that happens, up to and including making sure the information is correct that we get. But we try on it. We try to recoup fees where we can without making it to the point where the public comes in. You're extorting. We just started charging for fire sign-offs. And we try to find a balance of bringing in a little bit to help out with some of the office supplies, but not to the point where somebody can, they're not charging what?
So the reason why I'm having a hard time with it, number one, we voted it out. Number two, they assessed my house for $400,000 more than what I could sell it for. How does that work?
Not well.
So basically, they're overtaxing me, and you guys want to tax more. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That doesn't make sense.
Well, I mean, the question's been asked and answered, and I don't think we're not revisiting. Just so you know, we're not revisiting. We're revisiting what do we do now going forward.
Yeah, we
Right, but
heard
that
from the
helps us
voters, right?
justify what you're asking.
What's that?
that helps us justify what you're wanting.
Again, I'm sorry, maybe Richard, you can.
Well,
grab
you
that.
need more money is what you're at, right?
Well, but that's not why we're here. We're not talking about more money. We're talking about how do we live within our means, the means that we have now.
With this many people coming in, how's that gonna work?
That's
You
what,
guys
that's
are-
why we're here.
Exactly.
We lost fire.
So I, as, you know, just one measly me and my wife,
Where are you at, sir?
Sagle. I don't have a problem with helping you guys out, but we wanna know how the money's spent. Exactly.
So our books are open, and actually, the chief mentioned it, our fiscal year starts in October, so we're going through a new budget cycle. He put up our budget up there, one of the slides earlier. And, you know, you can come down to the station anytime and see where all that money goes. There's 5 commissioners that oversee the fire station for Sagle and how that money's allocated. And we worked with the chief and mentioned how many bosses he has. So we're in there making sure that every penny of your dollar, and part of it's our dollars too, because we live in as well, are spent appropriately. So, but you're welcome to anytime you want to.
And during the levy discussion, we did try to do that. We did try to say, here's where we're at, here's what we're faced with, here's what we're asking for, and here's what that will fund. And I was very limited on what I could say. Almost to the point I almost couldn't be honest, because I just had to kind of say, well, buy some stuff. I mean, not really, but I mean, I couldn't do scare tactics and I couldn't advocate. So it was really hard to say, this is what's going on. Now I can be perfectly honest with you and I can tell you what's going on in the districts and how we do it, because we're not going for a levy. We're trying to figure out how to get through what we've got going on here. Specifically, because you look familiar, but I don't know if you've come to one of our meetings.
Sign off on the place I'm building.
Oh, okay, perfect. Did I hold your sign off hostage? Because that's the
It was seamless, except, you know, time before that, it wasn't.
Okay. Was it seamless with me or seamless
It
not?
was seamless with. you.
Okay. So now we can have conversations about some of the big ticket items that are coming up in Sagle that we need to address, and that's kind of at the crux of personnel is the only thing that I can control. And so when we pulled personnel back, you know, kind of like any body that suffered an injury, you're gonna shunt, right? So we kind of pulled back. We're in that reassess phase right now. How can we get through these capital items we need to address? My job is to present those in the budget along with a 3 to 5 year plan of let's get these things bid off. And it's really hard for me to do this because every time I have to talk about this, I have to talk about the past, but there was not a solid plan going forward. Everything that was brought up as needing to be purchased was get a grant, get a grant, get a grant, get a grant. Well, get a grant isn't a business model. It can be a plan A, plan B, plan C, but at some point when you need that, I don't have the option to just say, well, we're just gonna run the current jaws of life forever, because they're not going to keep up. They're not serviceable. And if they break right now, I can't even get them fixed because they're so old. So at some point I have to come up with it. It's just one example. Right? So I don't always want to put stuff on the past, but we are where we're at, and I'm hitting the reset button and I'm saying, let's address what we've got to do. And then as we get ahead of this and we have some breathing room, then let's talk about staffing. Let's talk about where we work. Maybe we come through this strategic planning process and we learn a ton about our organization and what our community needs and expects that we don't know. And trying to get people to come in here to tell me exactly what they expect from the fire service has been really.
Boy, I have to apologize because the hint that I got from Facebook, it was like, you know, the people voted against it, but you're trying to railroad past it.
That's
And-
why we come.
Well, again, that's why.
We don't have the ability, we cannot do that.
Yeah.
Railroading past it is
Well,
not something. we
Again,
can
maybe you shouldn't believe everything you read on Facebook. That's for sure.
What they were referring to was the 208 solution. And before the levy even vote happened, it was, well, they're trying to pass the levy so they can consolidate. Then after the levy didn't pass, well, they're gonna consolidate. And that's always been out there because this bill passed that allows fire districts to consolidate. But it's a process, it's a step, and it requires community engagement, it requires will of the community. You might like it because the Sagle levy would go down, right? You'd like to pay less property taxes, but it would go up in Northside. And so that was at the crux of it, and I think that there was some assumptions that this board was gonna do it and just make that the solution. And then there was allegations that I was from California and I was trying to build a giant fire service. No, this is stuff that's on Facebook and it needs to be addressed. I'm the guy from California that's, you know, in cahoots with Mark Souter, and we're gonna build this big fire service, and we're gonna tax everyone out of their homes. That's not what I'm trying to do. I moved to Idaho for a reason. I'm just trying to deliver a good service. And if I can't deliver what I would consider a good service, I wanna have a conversation with you about what service is, and just make sure you're okay with it. So, thank you for letting me say that, but I think some of this needs to be said. I need to push back on some of these things. So unfortunately, I become the face of this as a
But
community.
unless the people educate themselves, like this, you don't hear the other side, you just read what, hear what you read.
Do you have a suggestion how to get folks here? I've been griping about this since I got here.
Doesn't work.
But you got, I mean, I'm not the person to talk about government. When I first moved here, it was a whole lot easier to get something, to build something, but now they're just, everybody's gonna get their hand in it. And it's frustrating. So, I mean, you've got government wanting to keep, take, and people just keep, saying, wait. I mean, if the balance was different, I think the people would get more involved.
Well, I think if everything ran the way the fire service, and I'm biased, but if everything ran the way the fire service, where we're transparent, they actually try to be efficient, right? Efficiency in government, that's an oxymoron, right? I get it. The only thing about our system up here is that we're a line item. Like, you see exactly what goes to the fire department, and you can trace those dollars right into our budget. So, people come, I talked to so many people during the levy. I call it the levy season, but during that time, and people were showing me their property tax bills. And, look, this was last year, and this was this year, and it went up 70%. I don't have those answers. And then they said, well, we got to audit the county. I don't have those answers. I can tell you what you're paying us and how that affects things. And if your valuation goes up, then yeah, your percentage of the fire department goes up. You can track it.
One more thing. Solution, all your electrical and cell current costs. That'll
Okay.
help.
Oh, there you go.
Awesome.
That'll help a little
Thank
bit.
you.
Not a lot.
It will.
All the
Appreciate it.
everything.
Everything else.
Appreciate it.
Pay the labor, material.
Did you see the recent where we had the rot in the post?
Yeah.
And then that guy came in and we were gonna go from a $7,800 solution and it cost $1,800.
Call me
So,
for anything.
Thank you.
Just your district, not Sanford.
Sandpoint has lots of money.
They got enough of the, your people.
So,
Tammy, you also have a chat. You have a message in the chat when you have a break.
I'm Jody Love, I'm in Westside. And I think what a lot of people out in the community, if you're not part of EMS in any form, I have a retired nurse and I was an EMT, so I have that background. People don't realize that we're talking dollars, yes, but this is health and safety. And everything costs. It costs for the doctor, it costs to do this and that. So you're asking, in Westside, we have one paid firefighter. You can't work that way. And unless you've been around it, you don't understand his safety, his life and injury goes up greatly. And so does yours. If they have to, he has to show up at your house. We had an incident where structure fire, then we had a burn victim. So that poor single fireman had to stop to take care of the burn victim. People don't realize it's health and safety. Politics, it doesn't matter what, side you're on, what race, what religion. Fires happen, injuries, trauma, and if it's your loved one that's at risk, you gotta look at what you're voting for. And I think the message was sent out wrong. Fire insurance is gonna probably go up. Well, they're already saying, people are getting bills saying our fire insurance just went up. Because you can't sustain with one firefighter or even two. You might have 5 firehouses, but it doesn't count if there's nobody there to man. It does to a point, I exaggerate on that, but it's health and safety. It's not politics. It's not big government. Yes, it's paid by government, but it's not big government. If you want to call 911, you expect a response. And you're desperate when you're calling 911. So just know there's time delays coming across this bridge to go over to Dover. Please, to give them the manpower that they need. Time could be a life. So.
good one over here.
Go ahead, man.
I'm Jean Girth, I'm in
Oh,
Sagle. And first off, I appreciate all the work that everybody's doing because this is a lot of work. And I appreciate that it seems to me that you put yourself in the position of having to deliver the bad news that we're pretty far behind where we should be to begin with. And then you add on top of that, that there's been a lot of development. And so I have two questions. One is, my understanding is from the way the structure the taxes is that all of these people can move in here, but you don't get any more money, even though there's more houses and more people to deal with. And do I have that right?
You're 99% correct. So the mill levy rate does come out. So if you had 500 houses and you build another 500 houses, everyone's mill levy rate should come down. It's not exactly 50%, it's not exactly half. And when there is new construction, there is a tiny percentage that comes in, but I'm happy to pull up the L2s and show you how small. You were talking about 13. I don't remember off the top of my head. It was something like $13 million in new construction in the Westside District, and then it was $15,000. So there is a little bit of new construction money comes in, and I don't know how that, it's very proprietary and I don't calculate that, but you're correct. If you look historically, and the best example is the Northside Fire District, when it was formed, it was 46, 48, somewhere in that neighborhood. 46, 48, they're at 20 now for their mill levy rate. So as that community has grown, the mill levy rate has come down.
Also, the new construction is a one-time thing, so it's not an ongoing.
It's just a little shop.
Yeah, for new construction, and then after that, hold it right into the levy.
Thank you for that, yes.
So,
Chief,
and I don't,
North Side was 2010, that was when it was like 46, 48, 2010.
2010,
Not when
okay.
it started.
Okay,
so I certainly don't understand all of the, how does this come to be, and who says what you can charge, but that does not seem like a sustainable model. When more and more people are moving in and you can't increase more than 3% a year, right? So the long term, I mean, you're talking about what are we doing right now with what we've got, which is certainly what you have to deal with, but there's also that long term, what are the solutions to that? Are there ways to change the whole funding thing? Because, which brings me to my second question, which is if this consolidation takes place, is that a short-term stopgap measure, or is it really gonna, I mean, I guess you don't know yet because you haven't done the study, but it's not gonna fix all of the underfunding problems.
no, and what he says is an administrative fix, right? Instead of
Right,
having
so
four
what does it look
budgets,
like on the ground?
instead of having four budgets, I have one budget. But it doesn't change the dollar amount, and it just changes the way that I can leverage those amounts. Right now, Sagle needs to take care of Sagle, and there is some sharing in the JPA. But in many extents, it actually makes, administratively, it's better. Financially, it's actually not as good.
So it might happen because that's what you can do now to help the situation we're in, but long term, we still need to be looking at how do you get more money for the fire, or assess what the community wants and how much they're willing to pay. And that probably brings me to my third point, which is I think you're right, and you're right too, about people need to be educated, and that's a big sell, but I think that's something where the community can help you. And I'm certainly willing to do that, and I know other people who are, if we can. It's a long-term process, right? And I want to have fire coverage, so I'm willing to help.
Go ahead. Please.
Thank you all so much for what you do, and Chief Armstrong. I'm Nancy Gillen, we talked on.
Yes.
Recently, so thank you for participating. We're doing, I represent a nonprofit that we work around the country, helping communities look at how they're gonna be sustainable as the summers warm up and we have increasing wildfires, which is another factor in all this, is we're gonna see more fires, not less, according to the projections. So it becomes a bigger issue as time goes on. My question related to Gene's question is, isn't that a state level policy issue that needs to be considered in the strategy? Is how do we get to Boise and explain this model does not work in terms of development not paying their share as newcomers come in? Shouldn't that be part of the strategy, a state level?
Yeah, so I want to be very honest with you.
Yeah.
Boise has to want to listen, okay? And there are people that are down there. There was discussions last year in last legislative session actually on taking away our new construction and taking away our 3%.
What?
So there. And I get the mentality of wanting to limit government growth, but they have to look at our service and our ability to do that. I will tell you that there are some fire chiefs that are phenomenal that are in the Idaho fire chiefs. They are running into the same issue. The fire chief for Star Middleton, which is just Eagle, Boise area. He is very active legislatively, and he has the ear of people in Boise the best you can. And there are several of them there that are down there telling them this is not sustainable. We have to do something, and everything is being looked at, from taking money out of the IDL funds and pushing that towards fire districts that are in the wildland urban interface, to what does it look like to maybe allow us every 3 years to increase beyond the 3%? What does it look like to have everyone share the cost when new people move in, but also have the new people help pay the money, right? The only thing that fire districts can get right now is impact fees, but impact fees can only pay for a new fire station and a new fire engine that goes in that new fire station. Districts like us, we don't need a new fire station. The only thing we need is maybe a new building here, but that's a replacement, so it doesn't work for the way the legislation is written for impact fees. So there's also discussions about impact fees and allowing us some leeway in reallocating those impact fees to help us address where we're at. But I will tell you that this is not the only county that is in this situation. Shoshone County, the 2 districts that are there, they're talking about their solutions for the future. They formed a JPA. I actually went down there and made a presentation to their fire chiefs on what a JPA does and what they can do. They were going to jump on the 208 thing. They're doing the same thing. They're hitting pause. They're saying we don't know what we don't know. This is going to be a long process. Star Middleton wanted to they were the reason the 208 was written. And they're even taking the time to say, well, we're going to go out and visit with the community. We're going to see what the community wants. Because if you go on Facebook, the community doesn't want 208. But at the end of the day, I think the people want to call 911 and have a fire engine show up. And so somewhere in the middle, we have to come up with a solution. And again, what I said tonight is, on paper and practical application, 208 doesn't work for us right now. That's my recommendation. That's my opinion as the fire chief. But I'd like to get into the meat and potatoes of our needs assessment and strategic plan, and maybe some idea flourishes.
So does that include then talking to people like us who will go lobby?
Yes.
I mean, and you can't lobby, I imagine, I don't know, but there are certainly people in the community that can lobby on behalf of our safety and security.
It will include external stakeholders, and I hope people that are involved. He's going to hold a series of meetings. And just so you guys know that if you came into the JPA meeting, we were talking about it last minute. So we have, I don't like consultants, but I do like people that come in from the outside and take a look at your organization. We have somebody that's going to come in from the outside and take a look at the organization, and they're going to work directly with somebody on the board, or maybe multiple members on the board, to evaluate our organization, to build a needs assessment. And then based on a needs assessment, you've done this before, but based on a needs assessment is how you build your strategic plan, right? And we can sit here and tell the community what we needed because we put out a levy and what we want to be able to provide service. And I'm not saying those asks are off, but maybe this guy comes in with something else. Maybe this guy comes in and says, well, you're doing all this wrong. Or maybe he comes in and says, you need a new fire chief. I don't know what he's going to say. But at the end of the day, I want somebody to come in and take a look at what we're doing from the outside, because all of us in this room are biased because we're in the middle of this thing. We're passionate about the fire service, and we're passionate about, but we need somebody to remove that emotion.
I have one more request, don't remove the wildland component, please.
No.
Please, thank you.
You want to read a couple off the Zoom? Oh, okay. So Doug, whoever is using the bulk of your services should be paying the most. If possible, for multiple mill rates on different neighborhoods. I'm not aware of a way to do that.
It would have to be a taxing district.
It's almost like a subscription.
Right.
As you need it. Yeah.
Then they just won't call for help.
Let's see, so Sagle is a great example as well. This must be a mill rate. In 2010, it was 2.3. Now we're under 90 cents per thousand. Ethan Cole.
Wow.
Wow.
Oh, so
So, what he's saying is, if you scroll back, Tammy, it sounds like, so Chief mentioned as the community grows and there's more houses and there's more property assessed, and it goes into the bucket to become available for taxation. Because our budget's frozen, we can only go up a tiny bit every year, so it gets distributed over more and more and more and more homes. The mill rate actually goes down. We only get a little pittance of money to offset that growth, inflation, and other things. 2.35 down to our current mill rate in Sagle is 8.924, as we talked about back in the levy. So he's saying it was 2.35 in 2010 as compared to 29. So that's quite a drop.
So that Tammy hasn't jumped down yet, but that last comment actually is really interesting. I think I'm saying that right, Doug? But anyway, that's a hybrid between an impact fee and making sure that the new people come in are paying into that mill levy rate without having all the other mill levy rates go down. So again, just the impact fee is you build a single family home, you have to pay the fire department $400. That's a one-time fee that goes into a pot of money, highly regulated on what we can spend that money on. It's to be growth. It has to be new fire engine in that new fire station. And it can't be a replacement fire station. It couldn't even be, we tear this station down and we move down to Duford. That would be a relocation and a replacement. So when you start looking at that, we're not really in and Northside has the same thing. You're not really in a position to need that kind of growth, those monies. Now, I do want to set up future generations for success. If we start collecting it now, it'll be available instead of the 10 years. But I think to his point, there needs to be some meeting in the middle of new folks come in and they come in at the rate and everybody else gets a percentage deduction, or allow us, every 3 years to go up 15%, or come up with something at the legislation level that says, this is this year's increase, right? And it gets closer to maybe inflation, because we're, less than half of what inflation was. And then I talked about inflation specifically in the PowerPoint about fire service and emergency equipment inflation. It's not related to the price of eggs at the grocery store. I wish it was just that. Specifically, fire engines are $1.2 million now for a fire engine. When I started out in the fire service, they're probably a couple $100,000. So, and that has jumped from about 700,000 pre-COVID to where we're at now. So you can make your assumptions on COVID and its impacts on you.
Dawson, go ahead.
Marissa Rains, Northside District. You keep talking about Facebook and community engagement. So I guess I'm just curious, like, what social media presence is there? Are you guys allowed to be on Facebook commenting on those posts? Do you send out like a monthly newsletter? Like how many ways are you doing outreach to the community?
So we haven't done a newsletter. We're on all the social media platforms, except TikTok. We can't get on TikTok anymore. But we're all on all social media platforms. Up here, obviously, the most popular is Facebook, right? You don't have a lot of Instagrammers necessarily floating around, but we are on. Our website exists. Community outreach has been the newspaper. I went on the radio during the levy season, trying to get people in here for the interaction. Because I'm gonna use you as an example. And I'm not saying breach you as in convince you of anything, but where I was able to have a meaningful conversation with this gentleman sitting across the room from, right? He and I had the same conversation on Facebook, it wouldn't have been the same. So we have to bring people in here. We have to get people in here and in person engaged. Newsletter's great. I wanted to do a monthly update to the commissioners on what's going on in the fire district, along with pictures and training and whatever else. It's great. Neither one of us have time to put it together. We every once in a while will look at each other and go, "What? It'd be really nice to be able to do that." The best I can do is sit down at 5:30 in the morning over a cup of coffee and send them an email and let them know what's going on. Now I could take that and I could put that into some more outward facing thing to the community. But again, not making excuses. I fell into this position, right? And then jumped into it, set this new thing up, got it running with Tammy's help. Then we ran right into levies. and really haven't had time to sit back to go, what does it look like to just be a normal fire department? You know, is Jason back?
Yeah, you're back.
Okay. We had a conversation earlier about, and I'm gonna put him on the spot and ask him to talk a little bit about what he talked about. You know, there's always been fires we've been putting out. Figuratively fires, right? Always something going on. Part of it is I create work because I'm trying to make a better organization. But Jason and I had a really interesting conversation earlier today in preparation for today, and I think he had a really good insight on everything that's going on. You want to jump in on that?
You talking about taking a tactical pause?
Yeah.
Yeah, we were just talking about since the city of Sandpoint left the organization, Jason, I've been here for 26 years as a paid firefighter for Sagle, and so that's some history. You know, we were part of Sandpointers. Sandpoint was part of us. And in the crew world, we call it the divorce, right? When Sandpoint said, we don't want part of this, even though they kind of made us come into their organization as far as like the HR world and admin stuff. And then they said, oh, we don't want that anymore. It's too expensive. It's all this other silly stuff. So, you know, Chief Armstrong and Tammy, essentially, since they were admin, they for the next 6 months building the organization up to what it is, with insurance and HR people and lawyers and bank accounts and phone carriers and all that stuff that would take the whole organization. And then jumped right on into the levy. Obviously that, essentially it was the easy thing. It's like, we need some help as the fire district. And I give chief credit for this because no chief, I mean, I've been through probably 6 or 7 chiefs over the years. I've never seen a chief come in and go, hey, we need help. All the other chiefs go, oh, we got it. And you're like, yeah, okay, we have old equipment, old stations and very few people on stuff, but we got it. Okay. This is the first chief that said, we're going to do our best, but we need to go to the community and find out what they want. And all you can do, like people ask me about the levy, we asked the community a question, the community answered, cool. No, that's no big deal, right? The communities we work for, and that's who decides what service level. It's no, I mean, it makes me work harder and longer, and it puts me and my crew in more dangerous situations, but we kind of signed up for that, so that's okay. So then we went into the levy stuff, and now we're kind of getting into this, and community's starting to come around, and you see stuff on Facebook that's kind of silly question stuff that's just so far out there, it's not even worth kind of addressing. Like, gee, maybe we need to take a tactical pause and just kind of put the brakes on, just not stop all of it, but we really need to focus on training, a 3-year plan, a 5-year plan, some strategic planning so that we can move the organization forward. Make sure we shore up our internal customers so that, we have good policies and procedures in place and then we can take care of it. Just kind of seems like now we're just going to jump in from one issue to another issue to now another issue, and Lord knows how long this issue, would take to kind of hammer out. And so, a tactical pause, and from what we see on the inside, there's a lot going on. It's a big district. There's a lot of calls. There's a lot of moving pieces that need addressed. That in every fire district across the nation. So, that's kind of discussion we had.
And just to make it, to reflect it back to me and my bandwidth and my time, this week has been the first time that I've had time to actually go to stations and sit down with staff and listen to them and ask them, how are things going? Well, the wheel fell off the engine yesterday, chief, but we didn't bother you. And little things like that, right? I jest, but that is important to me because I'm running calls with these guys. I'm showing up in the middle of the night on these fires, and I want to know what's going on with them. I want to know if their heads in the game. I want to know if they're meeting their training expectations. I want to know what they're encountering at the fire station because I don't have anything in between me and captains. That's it. And most organizations our size with our square mileage and our number of stations and our number of paid staff and number of volunteers would probably have 3 battalion chiefs and a deputy chief. And I don't feel that that's our priority. I feel that service to community is our priority, and a deputy chief doesn't do anything for that. So I'm not pushing for that, but I'm giving you an example of bandwidth. So it was really refreshing to hear that. It was really good to hear him so eloquently put it. And I think it resonated with me a lot to just say, we gotta step back. Every time I turn around, contract with Northside, every time I turn around, I'm putting this poor lady's plate, and she's along for the ride and she's riding for the brand, and I'm glad she's here. But I think we do need to focus on building what we have.
Is there another one over here? Then we'll keep going.
Yeah, I did have a question regarding if you combine all the budgets,
how do you reconcile the mill rates on each one? 'Cause like, as you said, say we only assess on improvements. Now, I can't remember, maybe Tom can help me. I can't remember 6 or 7 years ago, we tried to go ahead and get the community to go ahead and for Sagle District, and to go ahead and assess on improvements and also the land as well. And we had a meeting, for some reason, looking back at it, we had to have the Bonner County Commissioner. So we got down to it was met, that place was not outside the wall. Everybody said, absolutely no way, we only want to go ahead and assess on the improvements and say, okay, so that's be done. So how do you reconcile that when you go ahead and look at these different fire stations who, their formulas are a little different, so how do we go about that? Where do we look at?
I think that you said it the best, we haven't done it yet.
Well, there's two steps. We have to know, does that fix itself during the process, right? This is where we have to ask the tax commission. I'm not really sure why the county commissioners got involved, other than maybe they have to affirm the resolution that's passed by this board and has to go up there, because ultimately they have to change the way they assess. So I could see how it would have to go there. They even have to approve our impact fees. So I mean, a lot of stuff has to kind of route through that, but the formula that I did was assuming that Sagle would tax as if the other districts.
Same.
Right, the same. And that, what I said is what I don't know, and where I struggled with the math, and I can't remember if maybe you walked in late, but where I struggled with the math was trying to relate property versus assessment, because I can get those numbers, but the valuation. So what I did is I took the current valuations, did just a budget. But we would have to figure out, does Sagle need to fix that first? Do the other two districts need to come over? Either way, you're gonna get community pushback, because the way that people are getting levied is gonna change. And maybe for the better, but in talking with Richard today, and in talking with a few other people, there's gonna be some people that are hugely impacted. I know that there are some folks out in your neighborhood that want to see it changed, but I don't really understand why they want to see it changed, because we're talking waterfront properties. So, it benefits some, it doesn't benefit the others. So when you make that change, you have to be ready for those implications. So to answer your question, we don't know how that works out. We don't know how that flushes out, but it obviously has to be the same. And no, we don't add the mill levy rates together and times them by 3 and all the other stuff that you read out there. It's a really easy formula to take the valuations, add them together, the budgets together, divide the two, and you come out with a new mill levy rate.
I don't know if you follow anything from those previous.
No, well, it's not, that concept is not well received.
It's only worse now.
Yeah.
Probably.
Oh, another one online. We have someone who is able to manage your social media and public messaging, sending all of our needs for fire service along with aspirational funding should be a high priority.
So, and we can unmute people and people can speak. Thank you for using the chat, but I certainly raise your hand if you want to speak, and if typing is your style, then that's great. So I'm just gonna call you Doug, because I don't know if it's you, Doug. I don't know what it is, but anyway. But Doug, thank you for that question. So yeah, we have somebody that's actually doing that. That was very hard for me to do, especially as we headed into levy season. Hopefully people like what they see on our social media. If you don't, please send me a note and let me know. We aren't pushing stuff every day. We're very tactical on how we push it. We've got somebody managing that has pretty much done that their entire career and been a professional public information officer. We did try our best with levy messaging. Again, we're not perfect, and I'm just some guy trying to fight fire with my buddies. And so telling you what I need was just me standing up in front of the community saying, this is what our budget is. Here's what we'd like to be able to provide, and here's what it's going to cost. And so if we fell flat on that, then, hopefully, we can learn from that and move on. But I don't know if that answered your question. If it didn't, please raise your hand or type in a follow-up.
Northside. I'm up near the Samuel station, and I didn't get the details of it, except that once again, today, in that stretch, was it 3 to 4 hours ago, in a bad accident? yet Samuels doesn't get staffed. And I try to tell people when they were against the levy, is that I don't care how carefully you drive. I don't care that you have 10 mirrors around your car. It's the guy coming at you, hits you head on, or your loved one, and they wind up in the hospital or worse. And then you can't have stations where you, imagine if Samuels had the staffing, that's too, even if it's a few minutes, it makes a difference. But people are like, nope, I don't want to pay more. Nope, they're gonna charge me a whole bunch more taxes. My neighbor actually thought that they were gonna, the way they read it from the political party was that their entire tax bill was gonna triple. It's just a bad information, but I don't know about you, but if I was gonna pay a little bit more each year, figure that out per month, to know that they were a little bit closer to help me when I get in that bad accident, somebody was at the casino drinking or just too impatient, hits me head on. A whole minute can save my life.
Anybody else?
Go ahead.
So, my name's Bob Frank, I'm in Ken's district in the Westside. It seems that the long-term solution to the challenges is tax reform in Boise that changes the way we're able to get revenue for our public safety services. Currently, when there's a sales tax surpluses, Boise sends a part of it back to the counties. Counties cannot give it to the public service. They can't give it to anybody. They give it back to taxpayers as a credit against their property tax. And that's money that was already gone. You already paid it. And it seems that, anyway, that's a potential source of additional revenue, but it requires action at the state level. If you notice when you come to these meetings, who's glaringly absent all the time, it's our 3 county commissioners. They never show up for these meetings. And our 3 state representatives almost never show up for these meetings. But those are the people that we need involved. So as the election season comes up, you're here, so you're obviously interested in your community. You probably go to these pre-election meetings where either they're debates or they're informational. Ask the people that are running for office, when you go to Boise, will you carry a bill to change the tax code so that we can get additional funding for the fire service? Right now, we have a 3% a year increase that's supposed to account for inflation. We can argue whether it does or it doesn't. A reliable person in my mind said for the last 15 years it was 2.7%. But the chief is correct. That's not the inflation rate for the fire service. So our stuff has gone up way more. The first fire engines I rode on cost $105,000. The same fire engines today would be $800 to $1.2 million. Now, I'm kind of an old guy, but still, that's a lot of difference in cost over the last 40 years.
Yeah.
There's
We're in the wrong business.
Yeah. So the current code does not provide for increased demands on the level of service in a community or a district. All it does is give us this inflation factor. So they keep asking for the 3%, and that's granted under the law. That's not keeping up. And so we're all here trying to figure out what can we do to solve this problem. And the voters just got done telling us that they're not particularly interested in seeing a big property tax increase. So, and the chief is saying there's complications, and he's correct in trying to do a consolidation. But it doesn't mean that we shouldn't have an advisory item on the next ballot, perhaps, or the ballot after that, that says, if we consolidated the districts, this is what it would look like. Are you in favor or opposed? Just see what people say. Or we could do it as a survey, but you get 40 people answer instead of, you get 500 or 600 people that would vote if you had it on a ballot.
Well, just like things on, social media until May 20th, but things on social media, generally who follows you on social media, are your supporters, right? People that are gonna sit down and take time to fill out a fire department survey are your supporters. And then, of course, most surveys are not scientific and they're leading. So I really like that idea. This doesn't mean the decision's being made, but how do you feel? I don't know if we can do that. Can we do an advisory on the ballot? I don't know.
I've seen advisories on the ballot before, but I can't remember when, and I don't remember what it's for. But I don't know. We can ask the elections, county collective elections, tell us whether we can do that or not. And then the other observation I would say is people have pointed out the complications of how mill rates are determined, what kind of properties, et cetera. Whether it's fair to this district or fair to that district, inequity now should be intolerant. We're acting as a JPA, which means if we automatic aid, which means Westside, Northside, and Sagle, Selkirk are behaving as if they were one fire department. But the people in those three districts have widely varying different tax rates. But they're getting essentially the same service. They're being serviced by one fire department, but they're paying three different rates for it. Now, listening tonight, I can tell there's some serious complications over how you would resolve that without, you can't, take Bill Jones's taxes from $1,000 and tell him, well, lucky you, you're gonna be consolidated in this big district and your taxes are only going up to 2,000. You can't do that. So you gotta figure out a way that if you do a consolidation, that it's palatable. So,
And it solves the problem.
Well, and you have to solve, the Sagle problem. We're gonna talk tonight, we're gonna point it as the Sagle problem. But you have to solve the Sagle problem.
Yeah.
Right, not to mention your 80-20 split that you were talking about, personnel and operations, doesn't take into account capital needs.
No,
Does
it
it?
doesn't. And
So
it's not a
that's-
realistic number for today's operations, but
Exactly, but I
it
mean,
was
there's
still
this
some-
other
right.
thing, capital needs that are severe, that aren't even in that 80-20.
so I don't think I touched it all. Next time I come, I'm gonna bring a notebook, so I can write down all the points I want to hit. But I think this was to me, it seemed like a really productive meeting, a lot of good ideas. A really good description of challenge that we're up against for fire protection specifically, which is kind of what this is about. And I hope that you folks that are here that I haven't seen before will continue to come to these meetings. There are the first 3 Wednesdays of the month, there's fire district meetings.
How come we had to learn from my wife from Facebook?
And these gentlemen, and there's a woman on the North Side board, I believe, no, she's on
Sagle. She's online.
They listen. But if you're not here to tell them what you think, then the only person they're gonna hear from is me, because I show up a lot. And if you want me to make all your decisions for you, that's fine. But I think you might want to have some input too.
On the heels of that,
Oh, sorry.
no, on the heels of that, I would just say if you're here, and you can have whatever opinion, but if you're here, please take this message back. You came in here with a different perception. You've got your fire service bias, which is good. I'm glad you're here. Kevin, we've had a lot of great conversations, but we need these messages to get out, right? Did we talk about 208 tonight? Yeah, we did, right? There's no secrets. We're not hiding. Are we consolidating in tonight's meeting? No, right? I mean, this is the stuff that I want people to understand. I want them to get the truth so that they feel like we're approachable. They don't feel like we're the enemy, and so that they get engaged, because the last thing I want is Tim to be calling for community members to be involved in strategic planning and nobody's answering the calls. Because I can't tell you how many, I think it was up to between 110 and 115 public events that I did during the levies even. Some of it was one-on-one, some of it was big meetings, but I can tell you how many things Commissioner Roof and I showed up to and nobody showed up.
What about getting more involved with the very local committees in the county? We'll try to leave them out of the conversation with the negative comments that they are pushing through the county. Would that help? If they come to the table.
Been there, done that.
If you can get me an audience with people, I'm happy to sit down. They were personally invited to tonight's meeting.
BORCC.
I thought,
There's only one or two members that's on that committee here today, but not the one that matters.
it's just a slow education. Yeah, you're not gonna teach them in 1 day or 2 days. You gotta keep explaining to them what the need is and how the system fails to address the need. And reassure them that we're not talking about bringing California style taxes to the table. Which is not what we're talking about.
And even if they come in the door and they don't believe, or they don't want to hear, or it's not their priority, that's fine, because I want those people here too. I want the people in this room that think we should dissolve the fire districts. There are people out there that have reached out to me that want the fire districts dissolved. I want to have conversations with them, because I want to hear what the solution is. I want to hear what the repercussions of that this decision would be in the community, right? I thrive off those conversations.
Chief, back members at some point in time.
Yeah, I was gonna say the same thing.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah.
Good
Oh,
luck.
Dottie had one more comment.
A lot of people didn't realize when 208 was voted on. In the legislature, it was voted 43 to 24, there were 3 absent, so majority passed it. It went to the Senate, it was passed unanimously. They had no question about that, it was passed. So people here are screaming about consolidation, but your state people voted it in.
It's neutral revenue, or it's
Yeah.
revenue neutral, that's why they don't
Right.
care. And they didn't have to actually do anything.
That doesn't increase revenue.
Go ahead, and
I'm Diana Dawson and Sagle Fire District. I think it's been really, for me, educational, to listen to all of you. Just as a disclaimer up front, I voted for the fire police, and as a resident here, close to 30 years now, part-time and then full-time. I want to say how much I appreciate Chief Armstrong and what he has done in terms of moving solutions and away from just this. We're in an arena right now, disinformation, misinformation, and someone who studies and follows politics. I will tell you, the last election cycle did not cover very many voters. So when people say that our voters of the 3 different levies that were offered overwhelmingly voted it down, that means only a few people that showed up to vote, which always in these elections in May are very small numbers. What I see needing to happen, as I listen to everyone around, we need to get more engagement going. We need more education. I don't know how you do that, because it's a tough business. You invite people, as Chief Armstrong has, the fire districts have. People don't always show up. When they do seem to get serious is when things start to get really challenging. When we're at a point, and we're at a crossroads where we don't have what we need to have in terms of people and equipment, that's when people start to get serious, or God forbid, we have a serious crisis that wakes people up and saying, oh my God, the fire departments were right. We need more and better. And what I can say is our firefighters put their lives on the line every day. They're there no matter what. They don't ask if you're Republican, Democrat, or, you know, what your blood type is. They show up and they're there. What I can say is we need to do better. We need to do more. And this is just the tip of the iceberg, because I can tell you this, when people, and I've heard this out there online, oh, my taxes may go up $200 a year. Chief Armstrong brought this up and it's hit. The insurance crisis is coming. I can tell you, I'm in touch with people all over. I've been nailed myself. Got one of my properties texted me, $1,000, they just increased. I'm on the line whether they will cancel my insurance program or not. And I have spent thousands of dollars to do perfection in defensible spaces, to do all the right things, to enjoy the love of the woods and be out there and be responsible, and yet try to maintain fire prevention. The insurance companies have been hit in California. They've been hit on the East Coast with floods. And the way they regroup, if they are national, is they raise your rates here. They say, we don't want to bother anymore. You're too scary of an area, so we are not going to cover you. So if ever there's a time now for us all to get together as a, and I don't even care which side you're on, whether you're for the levy or against the levy, or get in there and get the real facts. Don't get on Facebook. Facebook is full of baloney sausage, and you can't trust anything that's being said on there. Go do your own. Get out there and let's get together and do what Idaho used to do really well. They used to get together as communities and solve problems. We need to get back to that.
I had one more thing I remembered that I wanted to say, and it's actually, maybe I just hear, and I don't hear that well, and I forgot to bring my hearing aids today, but for some reason, I hear the dispatch radio. And while we were sitting here, Chief Armstrong was talking about something. And one of the units that was out there asked for aid on a call. And they were told Spirit Lake's not available.
Denied.
And then they were told the next agency, whichever they were, wasn't available. Those are the nightmares that firefighters face. When you get in a situation, you need more resources, you don't have the people to do the job, and you ask for help. And the other ones are tied up too. And you know what? They're probably doing the same thing, going, well, we were just getting ready to ask you for help. So this is a problem that's reaching critical mass. And I don't know how many people hear what's going on in the background. Apparently my ear still trains to.
Careful, I'll give you a radio.
We're talking about the difference between our JPA and the 208. And my view is that we're probably 95% of anything that a consolidation, what I really I'm used to hearing the term merger would get us, except for one thing, is that in each one of our 3 districts, we operate a budget that usually had a reserve fund. Okay? Typically, it's not enough to buy any one big thing. We got to save up, and over time, we can replace. With a merger, those reserve funds come together. Okay, so now you're talking 3 times what each individual would have. You have some leverage, financial leverage. So that's the little piece that we don't have as a JPA, because we still have our boundaries of our districts, and our budgets are contained within that. And the opportunity to shift money is kind of a challenge. I just want to throw that out there. There's a fiscal impact to our operations that we probably presently don't have.
So for those of you that maybe are unfamiliar or just hearing the term JPA, maybe you guys understand what we do. I'm happy to either sit down one-on-one with you and explain the bones, the framework of a JPA. We have a JPA document that is available. Not to do a public records request, just send me an email, I'll send it to you. But if you wanted to start looking at this is used throughout the country in a lot of different areas. So like the Flagstaff, Arizona area, they call it the GFR. So there's 3 fire districts. Well, one's a city and 2 fire districts. We should warn those fire districts about what cities do, but anyway. But there's a city and 2 fire districts that work together, and they literally just run together and ensure that the right number of resources show up when someone calls 911. What that allows you to do, I believe the Phoenix metro area, even though they're independent districts, all run very similar to that. And then get into, there's another area in Arizona that runs that. Five Cities Fire Authority, which is over on the coast in California, they ran that way. 3 entities, so I'm not really sure how they got 5 cities, but maybe there were 5 cities in it originally, but when you start looking at that, what I tell people is our districts do not have enough resources to handle a major incident on our own. So we have to work together, right? We have to have mutual aid. The JPA is mutual aid on steroids, right? Allows us to leverage in other ways. But I have to start looking at this county as a system, because if we have a major incident, we're going to shift resources towards that incident. But I also need to think about coverage. And with very limited resources, we do that pretty well here. And our run cards since Sandpoint left have been revamped. An example of that was a structure fire in the Westside Fire District yesterday. We had 3 engines respond, a chief officer respond. Sagle engine moved up to Sandpoint to cover the area. If that engine was pulled in, we would bring the volunteer organizations in. Their response isn't guaranteed, but we would bring the volunteer organizations in to help cover like we did during Lake Netics. We also have Timberlake that will come up. I've never been told no by Timberlake, but I've been told no by Spirit Lake. It does happen where they are on a call. Their dynamic is they run an ambulance. So if they're on a medical aid, they now have that transport time where they have to take someone to the hospital and come back. So their availability is a lot different than ours. So I just wanted to explain that in case the concept of why we're working together, and really the framework of that gets very technical, and I won't bore you with that, but certainly happy to bring people up to speed if they want to know more about that.
Do your impact fee, but
Oh, yes. Development Impact Fee Advisory Committee. So the 2 districts of Sagle and Westside are looking at what impact fees would look like for new development future. And I talked about them during the presentation. It's for that new fire engine to go in that new fire station. It's directly related to growth. Based on that, we've developed what's called a CIP, Community Improvement Plan, meaning additional needs that we need related to growth. So the advisory committee would come in, well, real quick, let me back up. So those are the 2 districts, they're doing it for the first time. Northside Fire District already has impact fees. We need to re-stand up a committee so that we can move forward with that. So if you live in the north side, Sagle, where I go, Sagle, north side, west side, I've got to do it geographically or I get lost. If you live in those 3 districts and you want to be on this committee, please let me know. I specifically need people in development and I specifically need somebody in real estate. So those are the 2 seats that I'm really struggling with. Had some people reach out, lost them anyway. That you're in? Okay. So spread the word, help me get some folks real quick. What we're doing, we're going to revisit, re-stand up the committee in Northside. In Sagle, it's going to be 3 initial meetings. So you're going to come in and meet with the consultant to put this together because they have to do the evaluation, make the presentation. They're going to make the presentation on our capital improvement plan, tell you how they ended up at the numbers that they did. And then you'll sit down and you'll ask me questions about the CAP, the community improvement, or the capital improvement plan. You'll approve it, validate it, or recommend changes, and then it goes to the county level for approval. So it's going to be 2 to 3 meetings initially, and then what I want to do is I'm going to meet every 6 months after that. Initially, there's not going to be expenses, but having a meeting to talk about this is what we're collecting, here's what our balances look like, here's what we think we're going to spend this on in 5 years, because it's going to be a while before we get the money. And then ultimately, the meetings would then go through the expenditures, right? You, as a committee, would sit down and look at the expenditures and where the money was. And that's where that's your opportunity to say, this money is not being spent correctly, or this money. So that's what I'm looking for. So I need people for all 3 districts. I'll make it work. I'll add your name to the list. I think I have your email still. People will hear acknowledgement from me, but nobody will hear about a meeting date till I have the entire committee put together, and then we'll reach out. We'll have our first. Did I miss anything on the impact fees? Okay. Okay.
I'm happy to serve from Westside, but I'm not a developer and I'm not a real estate person.
Okay.
I'm just a firefighter.
I still need people. So 5.
Minimum of 5.
Minimum of 5. So I still have some spots, and then those 2 are the key. But I got some good leads.
I'm sure Ken's gonna rep it.
Chief, did you mention that impact fees don't cover the personnel at all?
I did earlier, but it's great to revisit that. Yes, don't cover personnel. Yep. equipment, tangible items.
I think that's a wrap. I'll stay around if anybody wants to talk one-on-one. I know the chief tries to make himself available, so he can out. Feel free to grab one of us for a sidebar. And, I think it was mentioned every Wednesday for the first 3 weeks of the month, there's a Northside's up for APA meets
Sagle and Westside are the second.
Sagle and Westside.
Sagle and Westside are the second
Second.
Wednesday?
Yeah.
West side's 9 a.m., Sagle's 5.
And we meet here for Sagle. So does
Westside's in Dover.
North side's the north side.
Thank you all for your engagement. And
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yes, you can.
Hey, I got it. Where's your wife? Outside. How'd that work out?
Before this up there, try with the left foot in the lead, and I can't get up. She was gonna drive the truck the other way, and I said, I can get up.
So the key to turnout.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another chat. He was.
He's almost so low with the coffee. I do not. So I have, we had a coffee scheduled. I saw that. And he goes, hey, I don't want to make this phone call. And he goes, I got to figure it out. So I said, man, let's reschedule. I had to dug in and I reached out.
So I, yeah, we're going to, I wasn't. And.
Well, get him to have coffee with you.
Oh, I don't get some on.
Okay.
I get on very far.
Do you? Okay.
So, so we talked about that totally an informative level. He's got some misconceptions about the board. He thought that boards could just approve. There's no recourse to citizens.
I'm the one who wants to buy it.
I would suggest.
Title and escrow? Does that count?
Okay, fine.
4.
Real estate.
Was that back?
Yeah.
North side.
Just in case you don't know. Thank you, sir.
She's in title
Take
and
care.
escrow.
Thanks for being here.
She lives in North Side and she's willing to do.
Hey.
I will
Does
ask.
that count? Okay.
I will ask. I'll have to ask Colin. If you give me your info, that'd be great.
Real quick. I'm taking the paperwork down, so you can go through it in the morning.
Okay.
You got any questions you want?
No, what I'll do is I'll follow up probably next Monday and just say, hey, confirming you got that, get him to, I know you're gonna email as well. I want to already. Okay.
I'm coming out.
Right.
Yeah.
If you're going, I would ask him when we validate these numbers. So the state's telling us one thing and they're telling us another. I'm fine with meeting in the middle. I'm good with that.
Well, I just nothing right now. We're not asking for anything extra. But, and I'll get a. Never see that. So that we meet that state timeline. And.
Thank you.
You're gonna be over there. Thanks. Can you drop by elections and ask them if we can put a, just an advisory issue on the ballot?
Does he?
See if that's even allowed. Yeah. So I was gonna do it next.
It was tough to see him have to sit.
I'll ask Roseday, he's the clerk.
Okay.
He runs all the
Yeah,
time.
he'll know.
Didn't listen for that.
Well, he said that. It's not, like, I don't,
So,
I just do what I want.
so I mean, that's why I thought the advisory question.
I tried to get him on the list. And come down tonight. He's supposed to, he'd work.
Yeah.
And then he could come in here and actually start seeing some stuff, but he's the fine tune. Right.
He's of course playing it,
And
right?
he doesn't come to these, but he wants to set his people.
He doesn't come to him. Neither does Bob.
Yeah.
You heard Mr. Lundy here.
Yeah.
Well, Souder said he was.
They're all great guys. And, don't have to agree with them on all the problems. But I have to say, that's how men's out on carrying it slowly through. They might do it in the right. But it's an improvement probably for a lot of people. They don't have the complications.
One of the things, and this is political, trying to play games, one of the things when you talk to him, you let him know that I recommend it against him. Trying to get the people their checks. Right. And so we talk to him, be like, Jim said it's not.
And he knows I'm for it.
Right. But it just helps me because they're to go back to California.
Yeah, you know what?
And the problem is, I can take it all day. My guys are tired. They're tired of being in it. And at some point, I mean, well, not at some point, it already is, it's distracting from the issue. It's like the conversation we had in Latitude, the conversation we had in Northside Fire. We spent an hour and a half talking about volunteers. I finally said, this is a distraction. This is nothing. This does nothing to solve our issues.
So when I first became aware of fire service, first thing I thought was, why don't they have combined California? Well, after a year of pursuing what's going on, I realized there's not a